Good evening, trustees. My name is Steve Lecholop. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Governance at TEA, and my team is responsible for facilitating the transition to the appointed Board of Managers. The purpose of the presentation today is to talk a little bit about what how the transition has proceeded to date, talk about the application pool that we have received during the first application window, and then, of course, answer any questions that you guys might have about the transition process or anything else related to the transition. Madam President, with your permission, I'll start with the presentation. Perfect. Thank you. So if you look on the screen, there's a chevron chart that walks through the entire what would end up being about 75-day transition process. There are a number of steps during this process, and TEA started on March 15th, whenever we issued the agency issued the enforcement letter, and in the enforcement letter announcing the transition to a Board of Managers, the agency stated that the board and the new superintendent would be appointed no earlier than June 1st. The agency felt that that would allow the agency to have a thorough and transparent process to recruit and select the Board of Managers and the new superintendent. As a reminder, the process didn't start in 2023. The process started back in 2019. There was a robust community engagement effort that was conducted back in 2019. The agency had over 300 applicants back in 2019, and the agency proceeded, this is before my time at the agency, a fair way through the process before the district filed suit and obtained the injunction that stopped the process. So what's happened so far? On March 15th, like I just mentioned, the application window opened on the TEA website, and that window was open for 3 weeks. It closed on April the 6th. During that first application window, there were 374 applications submitted. That number exceeds the number that was submitted in 2019 during the process that at that point had a 6-month runway as compared to a 3-week runway. And right now, the agency is in the first part of the application window where we are reviewing the 374 applications that were submitted. Let's talk a little bit about how those applications broke down. One of the disqualifying factors, one of the requirements that the agency is looking for in the Board of Managers that will be appointed is that all members of the board must live within the HISD boundaries. Out of the 374 total applications, 345 of those, 92%, lived within the HISD boundaries. We did follow up with that extra 30 to ensure that they didn't mistype anything. So we did our diligence to make sure that we're including as big and deep a pool of candidates as possible. Again, of the 374 total applications, 232 are from parents of current or former HISD students. 136 are alums of HISD schools, and 238 applications were from individuals who've worked as a teacher or for a school system at some point in their career. One refrain you hear frequently if you've been to or watched any of the community meetings or public information sessions that have happened is that the agency desires a demographic and geographic diversity on the board that we're going to appoint. This is a diverse group of Houstonians governing the Houston Independent School District. On the screen, you see a pie chart that shows a breakdown by race of the applicants. 40% were African American, about a third of all applicants were Anglo, 5% were Asian, 10% were Hispanic, and 12% qualify as other, which would be a combination of mixed races. On the screen, you see a bar chart now of the breakdown by trustee district. The highest was from District 4, 18% of all applications. And the smallest was District 3, only 4% of applications. This does reflect that we have received applications from around the district. There is interest in all areas of the geographic range of Houston ISD to serve on the Board of Managers. So what's next in the process? So the next step is the applicant screening and the training. So preliminary applicant screening of the 374 applicants is underway. And for a number of reasons, the agency decided to open a second application window. We want to make sure that all Houstonians have a second chance or more time to deliberate on whether they would be good fits to serve on the board. And so this second application window, it's currently open and it closes on April 20th. Importantly, anyone who applies during this second window is also going to have to go through all of the interview protocols that I'll talk about in just a second in order to qualify for the board. We just wanted to make sure that we captured as many Houstonians as were interested and create as deep of a pool as possible. This weekend, the first of 3 different interview steps is occurring. All applicants, all 374, have been invited to participate in a required Lone Star governance training. All applicants had the choice to attend either this weekend, here coming up in 2 days, on Saturday and Sunday, or the following weekend. So they got to choose one of the 2 weekends. But attendance at the Lone Star Governance Training is mandatory in order to continue in the process. We're also reaching out to any applicants who have subsequently applied during the second interview process or during the second application window, and also provided them the choice as well of either this weekend or next weekend. We will have a number of Lone Star Governance coaches providing concurrent trainings over the weekend, and we genuinely hope that all 374 plus attend in order to move forward in the process. After Lone Star Governance, to give you an idea of what the path forward looks like, there will then be virtual, and the list will be pared down. And the remaining candidates will go through a virtual interview, like a Zoom interview with a panel of agency employees. And then after those interviews, there will then be, after more pairing happens, a third observational interview that'll happen later in this month. I believe it's the last weekend of the month. And then after that, there will be even more interview protocols and processes that the prospective candidates will go through. So we are, as an agency, really insisting on a robust, in-depth process to help identify those who are most uniquely situated and qualified to serve on the Board of Managers. So the Board of Managers, I wanted to share just a little bit of information. You might recognize some of these slides from some of the community meetings if you watched or attended. But there were many passionate folks at these meetings, and so the information may have been drowned out a little bit. So I wanted to briefly go through just some of the information. So what is a Board of Managers? Board of Managers is appointed by the Commissioner of Education. They have the powers and duties of the elected Board of Trustees. We are requiring as an agency that these members of the Board of Managers live within the boundaries of HISD. And this Board of Managers governs the district. They create a strategic vision for the district and work in conjunction with the newly appointed superintendent, the same way that an elected board would work with a superintendent. The decisions for governing the district and the policies and programs that are put in place in the district they happen and they're decided at the local level. TEA is not making the operational decisions that are going to be happening within HISD. It's very important that this last bullet as well, and I'll talk about the transition back to the elected board here at the end of my presentation, but the Board of Managers is not permanent. This is a temporary intervention of a temporary group of folks who's going to approach some of the systemic issues that are facing the district with fresh eyes and implement processes and procedures and programs to remedy those issues in order to transition back to an elected board. Again, I'll talk about the time frame of that here in a few minutes. So what happens to the elected board once the Board of Managers is installed? So authority, governance and decision-making authority is removed from the board, but you will remain elected officials. Election timelines and board elections will continue. And this is really important because the elected board members will transition back on to the school board. So we need to make sure there are board members who are elected for when that transition period begins. These elections will take place on the same timelines as they have historically, and the processes, the internal district processes, and the relationship with the county running the elections is going to be the same moving forward. Because the transition is going to be, the Board of Managers will be transitioning back to the elected board, it is really important that you guys stay involved. We will encourage you to remain advisors to the Board of Managers, and we'll encourage the Board of Managers to remain in contact with you guys. You have historic knowledge that's going to be important as the district moves forward and as the Board of Managers progresses over the next few years. There will be opportunities for the elected board members to serve on community committees as well. One need that I have heard as I've conducted community meetings is the need for a bond. And if the Board of Managers and superintendent, the new superintendent, agree with that community sentiment, there would likely be a bond committee. And that would be one example of an opportunity for you to participate in the process as advisors moving forward. So what does the transition back to an elected board look like? The Commissioner has established 3 exit criteria. One related to academics, one related to specifically to special education services, and the third related to governance practices. So the academic exit criteria specifically relates to multi-year failing campuses. Namely, there can't be any. That is an important, bless you, Trustee, that's an important piece to establish that the systems have been changed sufficiently to allow the chronically lowest performing schools in the district to achieve student outcomes and student results on a higher level consistently. With regard to special education programming, the exit criteria is complete compliance with state and federal legal requirements for the special ed population in Houston ISD. This is an achievable outcome. Other large districts in the state of Texas are successful in achieving this particular criteria, and we're confident that Houston ISD will as well. And then the third objective requirement is effective board governance. So the agency will continue to monitor the board, will provide in-depth and consistent training and touch points with the Board of Managers to evaluate the board processes that are in place, to enhance them, build on them, and create a sustainable culture of systems and structures that will outlast the Board of Managers and that will serve as the foundation for the elected board to return once the exit criteria are achieved. So the timeline for return to elected trustee control is all based in statute. And so the first touch point is 2 years from implementation. So after 2 school years, the commissioner will evaluate the district's progress toward the exit criteria. And at that point, he has 2 choices. He can either announce the transition timeline back at that point, or he can extend for up to 2 years. Once the district has achieved all of the exit criteria, there's then a 3-year transition back to elected board control. So let's say the first stage takes 4 years. After the end of the 4th year, as a hypothetical, a third of the board, so 3 elected board members will roll back on to the board. At that point, there would be 6 Board of Managers and 3 elected board members. In this hypothetical, at the end of the 5th year then, 3 more would roll back on. So at that point, after the 5th year, again, just hypothetically, there would be a majority of board control. And then in the 6th year, the last 3 would return. Trustees, I have received questions about how those 3 individuals are determined in TEAs and in what order they would return. TEA's legal counsel is supposed to be providing me an update on that, hopefully by the end of this week, but definitely next week. And I will communicate with your legal counsel to make sure that you guys are fully aware. And then at the next public meeting that I have, I'll clarify to the public the answer to that question as well, just so we can create expectations for you guys, especially as your elections start to come up here in November. All right, so that is what I hope was a short and plain explanation of the process to date, where we are, what to expect moving forward, and then some basic information about what a Board of Managers is and what the transition back to an elected board would look like. Madam President, I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
So trustees, we are now ready for comments or questions. We will do 2 rounds of 2 minutes per trustee. If an additional round is desired, that can be done with a motion, second, and board vote. I have Trustee Baker in the queue first.
Thank you, Steve, Deputy Commissioner, for coming to Houston. Thank you for your presentation. My first question tonight, and I thank you for answering most of our questions in the executive session. My first question out here is, you mentioned rolling back 3 a year piece. Was there any thought given in rolling out 3, as you all intervene, rolling out 3 per year as you roll back in?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking, Trustee, and it's a good question. This statute is plain that the appointment of a Board of Managers is the appointment of an entire board, and it's not a piecemeal Board of Managers.
Thank you. And let's see, are you going to forward this presentation to us by chance?
Yes. So the presentation will be appearing on the district's website immediately after the meeting is over.
And finally tonight, and I've heard it before, but finally, just what's on my mind tonight is, could you restate the 3 main reasons that the state is intervening over HISD since 2019? What happened? You said.
Yeah, and so, Trustee, you're asking about the why. Why is TEA doing this now? So there are 3 reasons. The first reason is that in 2019, Wheatley High School counted to 5 under the then existing state law, the still existing state law. What that means to count to 5 is that Wheatley at that point had 5 or more consecutive years of unacceptable academic accountability ratings. And what that did, it triggered a law that compelled the commissioner to do one of 2 things. The statute says the commissioner shall do one of 2 things. Either, number 1, close down the school that counted to 5, or appoint a board of managers over the district. The commissioner at that point determined that it didn't serve the students' community of Wheatley High School to close down the school, and it didn't address the systemic problems that were in place throughout the district. And so he decided to appoint a board of managers. Shortly after he announced his decision, the school district filed a lawsuit and obtained an injunction that prevented the commissioner from moving forward in that appointment process. It wasn't until that lawsuit was filed, I believe, in November of 19, and it wasn't until January of 23, after a number of appeals, that the Texas Supreme Court entered a ruling, I think it was January 15th or around there, that said that the injunction was invalid, which allowed the commissioner to move forward. The commissioner's decision point to continue moving forward at that point rested in the mandatory requirement under state law that he do one of those 2 things. And in 2023, just like in 2019, it was the commissioner's perspective that appointing a board of managers was the best solution for Houston ISD. That is the mandatory reason why TEA made the decision that they did, why the commissioner made the decision. There were also in 2019 2 other reasons, and so you referenced 3 in your question. Under state law, if a conservator is in place for 2 or more consecutive school years, the commissioner has discretion to appoint a board of managers. In 2019, at that point, there was a conservator who had been in place for 2 or more consecutive school years. I think at that point it was 3 consecutive school years. So that was another rationale, a discretionary one, but another rationale. And then the third rationale was was called a special accreditation investigation. This investigation concluded that the Board of Trustees had violated state law on multiple occasions, specifically by violating the Texas Open Meetings Act. There were a number of other findings and conclusions that were contained in that report. But again, under state law, the commissioner may decide, discretionary, to intervene on the basis of a special accreditation investigation as well. So in 2019, there were 3 bases for moving forward, mandatory 1 and 2 discretionary ones.
Thank you so much. I'll just pause right there and allow my colleagues. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Trustee Guidry?
So you stated in the community meetings then, you stated that no one would be selected before June 1st. How is it, sir, that there are names seriously circulating out there who have said they're already appointed to the Board of Managers, which would be disingenuous to the community, because you've stated that you're looking for 9 board members, but if you've already selected 3 to 4 people and those people are stating they're selected, then that would be disingenuous to the community.
Yes, ma'am, I agree, Trustee. I can state unequivocally today that there have been no selections made. Not a soul in Houston or elsewhere has been notified that they will be a member of the Board of Managers. Everyone who previously applied in 2019 was told, and was interested again, was told that they have to go through the process again, and that there are no guarantees that anyone would be selected. We have 374 applicants, plus I think another 25 or 30 that have applied in this second window. And we are evaluating everyone on equal footing and with fresh eyes. So, Trustee, I appreciate you asking the question, but there have been No promises made, no commitments made to anyone. That
Well,
they
I
are,
can assure you, sir, that those names are out there, and if those people are selected, there will be some notice to the community. Let me go back to some questions that one of the community members asked. Will TEA commit to sharing with the public?
Yes, ma'am. TEA is committed to having a transparent and open process throughout the entirety of the selection of the board and training of the Board of Managers. There are parts of it that require engagement, active engagement from the applicants, like the Lone Star governance trainings, that will not be open to the public, but are being we are inviting all of the applicants to. Any of the materials submitted during or presented during these trainings will be subject to open records request and will be available to the public.
And all meetings, except of course, closed sessions, will be open to the public, correct?
All meetings of
Board
the elected
meetings.
board?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. So the Board of Managers will have the same rules as the Board of Trustees. They will have to notice meetings. They will have Open Meetings Act requirements. They will have to not only comply with the law, but comply with local processes as well.
Okay, and so you stated in the 3 reasons for takeover that it was the best solution to appoint a Board of Managers in 2019. What about right now? Why does he feel like it's the best solution right now?
So, Trustee, the Commissioner had 2 options that in order to act. One is to close Wheatley High School.
Well, no, that's not true. He could have done a soft close with a repurposing. Isn't that correct?
I don't believe that that's correct, Trustee.
Yes, that is a correct statement, and if you, I would suggest you go look at it. Not that it matters, but that was an option, that he could have done a soft close, repurpose, open Wheatley with another segment to it, right? You've read the bill, correct?
Of course.
Okay, and so you understand that that is a part of it, right? That he could have done that.
Trustee, ultimately, the Commissioner decided that closing Wheatley, repurposing, if what you say is accurate, and that's not something that I'm personally aware of, that wasn't the best solution for Houston ISD, the systemic concerns that are prevalent across Houston ISD, and also he didn't feel that it was the right thing to do to the Wheatley community.
And can you tell me, sir, can we have Mr. Moratti explain to us why not? Because you're saying that he didn't feel like it was the right thing to do, but I certainly would like to hear from Mr. Moratti why he feels it was not the right thing to do. Thank you.
Trustee Allen?
So my first question is that he could have chosen to repurpose one school, but he decided to take over 200.
Like I said a minute ago,
Okay, yes, I got it.
Trustee.
Next, in the interview with the Houston Chronicle with Lisa Falkenberg, she asked him who would the Board of Managers report to. He replied, me. So, we spent what I consider a great deal of money for redistricting so that each district serves 160,000 voters. If the voters wanted citywide representations, they would have had the opportunity to do that. If there is a representative from each district, like I heard on the news the other day I forgot what channel, that there were not enough Hispanic representation, so they opened it up again and basically said that in District 3 didn't have any people. If there is a representative in those applications from each district, will he take that into consideration and maybe have one representative from each district, or has he decided and chosen that he's going to do citywide and he's going to pick who he wants?
So, Trustee,
will he consider one district a representative from each district if it is possible.
Yeah. So certainly it's a consideration and it is a possibility. The agency is committed to geographic diversity. We want all of the areas around the District of Houston represented. But
did you answer my question? Did you say that he would take that into consideration?
Certainly it would be a consideration where the individuals live, but it's not a determining factor or a disqualifying factor if people live on either side of the lines.
Okay, my next question. The district has over 200,000 students who learn in different styles. The commissioner is stuck on the direct approach to reading. He suggests DISTAR. He calls it DISTAR, which turns out these cookie-cutter students on the same level. What about project-based school curriculums? Is he planning to put all of the schools on a direct approach to reading, even though some schools are being very successful?
The commissioner won't be making any programmatic decisions in the district.
That's not what he said in that interview.
So
maybe you need to read it. Houston Chronicle.
So I watched the interview that was posted on the Houston Chronicle's website.
Okay.
The commissioner was giving examples of best practices that could possibly be implemented, but he was very clear to point out, as he has in every public statement he's made, and me and my colleagues have made about this intervention, that those decisions, programmatic decisions, won't be made by the agency. It is the agency's job to appoint leadership, a superintendent, and a board of managers who are going to set the strategic vision for the district and identify among themselves the programs that are going to allow for student outcome improvement in the district.
Okay. Thank you. I have 1 second left. I'll go wait till round 2.
Trustee Cruz.
Thank you. Can we go back to the slide with the exit criteria, please? So my question is, and you might have said this, sorry, it's been a really long day. So for the third one, effective board governance, what's the metric? Because as a board, we have, HISD was actually one of the early adopters of Lone Star governance. We obviously are not perfect in it, but we have definitely made a lot of strides, and we adhere to, we have a monitoring calendar. We use a lot of the tenets. So how are you going to measure how the board is doing on that?
Yeah, Trustee, that's a good question. That is feedback that we have received even before tonight. And we are in the process of creating objective measures, more objective measures within the Lone Star governance framework so that expectations of attaining these exit criteria can be created and would be created. So we are in the process of designing kind of what the objective metrics would be.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the queue for round 1? Okay. I see Trustee Dygard in the queue and Dygard, Santos, and Bluford Daniels. Trustee Santos, you're in the queue on the computer, so okay. Are you okay with going next, Trustee Bluford Daniels?
Sure, I'm ready. I'm glad you came in here and took this heat. But we'd like to see Commissioner Morath to discuss all of this with all of the questions and concerns with all of us collectively. We have been a board. Yes, we've got some issues and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we'd like to have him, because I know he talked to President Hernandez, but President Hernandez didn't give the questions that I was concerned with. So I'd like to see that done collectively. And you mentioned about the 374 applications exceeded the 2018 number. There are only 2 board members left from 2018. So when you talk about, and even when you bring up about the 2018, 2019 issues in the walk-in quorum, there's only 2 board members left from that group. So why wouldn't the commissioner use the shall and remove the 2 board members that he keeps referring to, part of the rest of the group, from 2018 and 19 as opposed to changing us all out. Because we're all making strides, upward strides, obviously in the right direction. And I think even with the LSG, yes, that's a guide that we should be working by, but it's still just a guide. Everything is not black and white. There's always gray area. And you can't use one stencil to paint an entire picture other than, unless you have it tailored to every particular district. So I understand my colleagues' questions and concern with our district because, as I mentioned to you briefly in passing, District 2 has been the most overlooked district in HISD. It has the lowest performances. And I just wish my colleagues had been continuously looking at that as well, because in order for a wagon to continue to roll with one broken wheel, you've got to fix that broken wheel. You talked about, and another thing I suggest too, is, and thank you for just taking this, but cross-training. We've not said anything about cross-training with the Board of Managers. Don't get somebody from the West Side that applied and send them over there to leave them in the West Side. Send them over there to District 2, Tuffy Park, Cashmere Gardens. Send them over there. Let them cross-train. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Santos?
Thank you, President Hernandez. Commissioner Lecholop, which large districts in Texas currently meet all three of the exit criteria?
I don't have that information standing here right now, Trustee.
You're the Deputy Commissioner of TA? Okay. When is the last time you talked to Abbott's staff about vouchers?
I have not talked with the governor's staff about vouchers.
How many parents have you tried to connect to Abbott's staff while you were acting in your official capacity?
I received a request from a member of the governor's staff. We frequently, at the agency, connect legislators with folks in school districts who have different policy experiences, and this was an example of that.
So this was the only time you abused your authority to help Abbott push his voucher program? Or was this the only time you got caught?
I respectfully, Trustee, I never did such a thing.
Okay. Has Mike Morath ever spoken with Abbott about vouchers?
I don't know, Trustee.
Have you ever spoken with Abbott or his staff about turning existing public schools into charter schools?
No, Trustee.
Have you ever spoken with Abbott or his staff about turning... have you ever spoken with Mike Morath about turning existing public schools in HISD or any other district into charter schools?
No, Trustee.
Will you promise not to enter into any charter contracts for the management of any of our district-managed schools?
So any programmatic decisions that are made are not going to be made by TEA. Those decisions are going to be made by the superintendent in connection with the school board, the board of managers, as they analyze what are needed, what programs and processes are needed for the school district. That's not a decision that TEA would make.
But did you not just tell my colleague that the board of managers will be held accountable by Mike Morath?
Ultimately, the commissioner has the decision-making authority whether to replace the board of the members of the board of managers. So in that sense, they are accountable to him.
So you can't promise that you will not turn our local public schools into charter schools?
TEA will not be doing that, no.
But the appointed board of managers, hand-selected by Mike Morath,
Trustee,
will be carrying out his orders.
As I explained just a minute ago, any and all programmatic decisions that are implemented in Houston ISD after the appointment of a board of managers and a new superintendent will be the decisions exclusively of the superintendent and the school board. That relates to curriculum, it relates to personnel issues, it relates to any kind of programs or policies, it relates to grant offerings. And so everything that is programmatic within the district will be a decision of the new superintendent and the appointed board of managers.
And how will that superintendent be selected?
The commissioner selects the superintendent.
So the commissioner who will select the appointed board of managers, he will then select the superintendent. You're having me believe that the decision is on the superintendent and the board of managers not to charter out voucher out our schools?
There are two parts to your question. Yes, the commissioner appoints both the superintendent and the 9 members of the Board of Managers. The second answer, the answer to the second part of your question is that the superintendent and Board of Managers then creates the strategic vision for the school district and determine which programs, policies need to be put into place to achieve that strategic vision, ultimately to improve student outcomes throughout the district.
I'll reserve the rest of my questions for the next round. Thank you.
Trustee Dygard.
Thank you. So regarding supporting all campuses, in addition to monitoring the school ratings, like you can have a B campus with a whole bunch of students in them that are multi-years behind grade level. So will there be monitoring of how kids are doing or just the school ratings? Like how we're doing, are we increasing the percentage of kids who are reading on grade level by the end of 3rd grade? Are we increasing college and career readiness in kind of those sub-levels of campuses, not just the ABCDF?
So it is our absolute expectation that there will be progress monitoring toward goals that are set by the school board or the Board of Managers, just as a normal functioning board would. These are 30,000-foot exit criteria that the commissioner is going to take into account when determining whether to extend the Board of Managers or start the transition back to an elected board. The school board, though, it is good governance, unquestionably, to identify goals, constraints, and conduct progress monitoring toward those goals. That is not related to the exit criteria. That is a best governance practice. Then it is our full expectation that the school board will conduct such practices.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Lone Star governance, the research behind it is these, data has shown these are the practices that if a board and superintendent team engage in these practices, they are correlated with an increase in student achievement. Certainly boards can do it without the framework, but the framework helps provide a roadmap and a self-evaluation process so board members can know that they're actually engaging in that. And that's what the 3rd bullet is about, right? Like you're going to be utilizing like that self-evaluation within LSG to monitor if they're actually moving through that.
That's absolutely right, Trustee.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Wade.
I haven't gone yet. Yes, thank you. We had started our community engagement process, going out to community to envision our new goals. We're starting the process. And we were early in the process, but I'd like to know how the Board of Managers, if they plan to do the same thing with the community, is make sure they go out and get the vision and values of the communities all over Houston.
Yeah, it will be an absolute expectation, Trustee, that the Board of Managers conducts thorough, effective community and stakeholder engagement. That, just like elected members of the board, is one of the absolute requirements of serving as a governing body of a school board. Understanding the needs, the wants, the desires of the community, understanding the context of communities and local schools, and then using that information gathered to come together to create or enhance or modify the vision, mission, values of the district and the goals that will then be monitored through the Lone Star governance framework.
Thank you.
Okay, I will end round 1. Okay, Trustee Baker.
Thank you. Just had a follow-up question. When you say on the exit criteria 1 that HISD will not have any multi-year failing campuses, do you mean like going forward, if you get ready to transition out, or do you mean that because a new culture has been set, because new standards have been set, and because you're giving specific instructions from the TEA that well, let me just say, okay, so you mean that going forward, even with the Board of Managers, you want to make sure that principals and teachers are teaching their children that there will be no more years of failing schools, or do you have a plan ready to push out to ensure that there will be no more failing schools?
Yeah, and so let me clarify what multi-year failing means, because it is a source of questions that we have received at the agency. Multi-year failing campuses would be any campus that receives an unacceptable academic accountability rating for 2 or more consecutive years. So 2022-23 and 2023-24. That would be 2 years in a row of unacceptable academic performance. Under Senate Bill 1365, unacceptable academic performance is defined as a D or an F. And so to satisfy this exit criteria, there are no campuses in the district that have 2 or more consecutive years of D or F ratings. Certainly, especially serving students that are economically disadvantaged. I know this from my experience in San Antonio ISD. It is incredibly difficult work, right? And there are situations and circumstances where schools aren't receiving the supports they need, and they achieve a D or an F academic rating. The key to this exit criteria is for the district to then focus resources on those particular campuses that have a bad year. We understand and acknowledge that sometimes schools have bad years, right? Like I said, the work is incredibly difficult. To redirect resources so that that campus that had an unacceptable rating does not, for a second year, have another unacceptable rating, right? So that is the key to this particular exit criteria. No campuses with 2 or more consecutive years.
I understood. And also, how will you put some things in place to ensure that there's no more cheating on the STAR test or allegations of cheating?
Cheating on the STAR test would be something that the new superintendent and the Board of Managers put systems in place to ensure that something like that never happens.
Thank you so much.
Trustee Dygard, you have 45 seconds in your first round. Would you like to go?
Sure. I have one last quick question. So you have all of these applicants. You're going to pick 9. I imagine that within that pool, there's a significant number who could be great community members to work with this new Board of Managers in some capacity. Is that something you guys are exploring, some kind of a community council or whatever, to help broaden the connection these 9 individuals will have with incredibly diverse communities throughout the district?
It's a great question, Trustee. We don't know exactly what that would look like yet, but absolutely we intend to leverage these people who have self-expressed interest in helping Houston ISD move forward, and engage with them, even if not on the Board of Managers. There will only be 9, but to engage with them and partner with them in the community engagement efforts. Again, I don't know what precisely that'll look like, but we fully intend to utilize the interest of these, I was not a math major, 365 extra folks who are not selected.
Okay, now I don't see anyone in the queue with time left, so I will go. My first question is about the exit criteria over special education. We know that there has been 2 special ed conservators in the district for over 2 years. They have been able to give directives to the district over special ed, and we still need work on that. So what is the plan to change that so that it doesn't take an extra 2 to 4 years to get the special ed where it needs to be.
Right. The absolutely special ed programming will be a focus not only of the new superintendent but also of the Board of Managers. The 2 special ed conservators will remain partnering with the district as force multipliers to help implement whatever changes to special ed programming occur under the new superintendent and the new Board of Managers. But from a programmatic perspective, the actual policies, processes, programs, those will be determinations made by the new superintendent and the Board of Managers, with the understanding that this is an absolute critical point of focus. It is one of the exit criteria, and it needs to be one of the first and primary objectives that the superintendent and board focus on.
So if the conservators will remain with the district, technically HISD can trigger the law again by having conservators for more than 2 years. But that's not part of the exit criteria.
Well, Trustee, the law's already triggered, and so...
Like it could keep on triggering it, correct?
Oh, well, no, I don't believe so. Once the Board of Managers is appointed, the trigger has already been triggered. And so nothing that happens in the future, including, like an example, there's an elementary school that has had a number of consecutive years of unacceptable academic performance in the district. This year, if that elementary school doesn't receive an acceptable academic rating, it would technically trigger the count to 5 rule under Senate Bill 1365. But the trigger would be unnecessary because a Board of Managers was already appointed. And so you wouldn't need kind of multiple triggers, including the 2-year conservator, whether it's the special ed conservators, the academic conservator, or anything else, because the law has already been implemented.
Okay. So for the multi-year, in order to break the consecutive 5 years, you just need 1 year to break that for the school to get out of DRF status.
Yeah, under the law, in order to break the chain, right? A school would only require 1 year, and this is actually what happened, or what would happen if that elementary school that I was referring to this year would get a C, academic accountability rating.
So the
It would break the
previous
chain.
years wouldn't count anymore. That school is automatically off.
They get to start fresh.
Okay.
And that's true for any district across the state, Trustee.
Okay. So I know we've discussed this already, and I have other trustees who've asked the question, but the Board of Governors, of Managers, one of the exit criteria is that there'd be effective board governance, but nobody on this board and nobody from the public has any input that can change that. So how would we make sure that there's an effective governance structure in place? Other than the commissioner, who else can make sure that there's going to be an effective board governance?
So the Board of Managers will have a Lone Star governance coach. That coach will work intensively with the Board of Managers to evaluate, to teach, to hold accountable to kind of attaining the platonic ideal of what Lone Star governance, what good governance will be. So they will be receiving extensive training and support in order to make sure that third exit criteria is accomplished.
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but we also have a Lone Star governance coach and have had one for a while. And when I joined the board, we also had a Lone Star governance coach. So that I feel like we need a lot more clarity over that. We will move on to round 2. I see Trustee Allen in the queue.
Okay, Deputy Commissioner, I understand that you've been with TEA for 7 months, so you may not exactly know the answer to these questions. But what happened when the Board of Managers and that new superintendent does a terrible job And the students regress because the direct reading approach stifles students at a grade level because we have a criterion-based test rather than a norm reference test. The teachers don't know how to adjust because they have no grade level guidance. Will he just wipe them out and give a new group a chance? Or what will he do with that? If the superintendent is a terrible superintendent, you said that if they were governed by the Board of Managers, does he wipe out the new superintendent too, or just wipe out the Board of Managers and just keep wiping until it gets all of our children are unstable and doing a terrible job? Then you're giving them a chance to do what you're not giving us a chance to do. You're not giving us a chance to make sure that these three things are the extra criteria. So what makes you think that a Board of Managers is going to come in and be able to do that? They won't even know the systems. They won't know the acronyms, and our new members can tell you that. They had to learn, it took almost a year for them to learn the acronyms. So by the time they try to learn something, what happens when they do that terrible job? And we can't get back in because they keep doing a terrible job.
Trustee, the history of the appointment of boards of managers in the state of Texas over the last 15 years.
Oh, they have a wonderful history.
There is a track record of success, and we have every reason to believe, based on that track record of success, that the same thing will happen here.
How come you're the only person that knows this track record of success and everybody else does not?
We've presented this, Trustee, at a number of community meetings. We presented this chart that shows all of this, the 7 districts. I will be happy to come before the board with that slide the next time I present to the board, and I will send it to board services.
What's going to happen when they keep tanking?
We have no reason to believe, and we have every expectation that the board will be successful and improve student academic outcomes in Houston.
What happens if they do keep tanking?
We don't believe that that'll happen, Trustee. We have
But what happens if they keep tanking? Hold on, because how many seconds? Let me ask this other question while I got 23 seconds. Will candidates who lost to a current board member be disqualified from serving because they have already been rejected by the public? In other words, will Commissioner Morath usurp the voting process by taking out the person that they voted for and replacing with someone who was rejected by those same voters?
Trustee, that is not a disqualifying characteristic. In order to encourage a broad and deep pool of applicants, there are only 3 disqualifying characteristics that the agency's identified. Number 1, by statute, any staff member of Houston ISD cannot also serve on the governing board, and so any applicants that come from Houston ISD would have to decide whether they move forward with the Board of Managers or whether they find another job. So it would be disqualifying if a staff member in Houston ISD did not.
That's not my question. Will he take out a person voted and put in? Is that possible to put in a person that was rejected?
It's not a disqualifying factor.
Is it possible? Because I know people that ran against me that are now running for the Board of Managers. So is it possible that he could take me out and put in a person that the voters said no to?
We are not disqualifying any people who previously ran for this.
Is that a yes or a no?
So I think it is possible, yes.
Thank you.
Is that the time? Trustee Guidry?
So, and I guess you could tell I'm not happy about this, right? I am an attorney, as are you, and I set aside my practice to step in to help these children. And since I've been on this board, we have moved upwardly up, right? And so to step in at this point really concerns me about the democratic process, okay? So, and you say that you have stated that the law has been triggered and that Mr. Morath has to take this. This is something that he must do. Will you agree with me that he does not have to replace this board with a board of managers?
His only other option would have been to close Wheatley High School.
or repurpose it, but you haven't read the statute to that degree. You have to go down a couple of, I think it's down about 3 or 4 levels, and you'll find it. So instead of closing one school, potentially, and of course I'm not advocating closing Wheatley, let me just say that, because I think it could have been, I know it could have been repurposed. But even if that were the case, instead of doing that, he believes it's in the best interest to take over 274 schools as opposed to helping one school.
Closing Wheatley High School wouldn't address the systemic problems that have been pervasive in the district for many years.
But the systemic problems is not why you stated they, initially that you came in and said because Wheatley was had failed for 5 years. That was back in 2019. I was nowhere around the board at that time, and most of these people were not. And again, I'm sorry. This is coming out towards you because I prefer really to speak to Mr. Morath, and I prefer that he would come before us. But essentially, I can never wrap my head around what you all are doing, what the state is doing right now. And I'm just going to be clear about that. I can't do it.
Anyone else in the queue for round 2? Trustee Santos.
Deputy Commissioner Lecholop, you mentioned that there are large districts that meet exit criteria 2. Are there large districts that meet exit criteria 1?
Yes.
0 multi-year failing schools?
I believe so, yes.
If so?
I'll happily check.
Okay, so what are they? Who are they?
So I don't know off the top of my head. I will happily check, though. I believe that there are.
Are there any that meet exit criteria 3?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. You can't name any large districts that do?
Not standing here right now.
Okay, so, all right. How many districts in Texas currently have a minimum 1 school that have received a D or F rating for at least 2 consecutive years?
I don't have that information in front of me, Trustee.
So does that exit criteria mean that HISD will never have an elected board if there are any campuses with 2 consecutive failing grades?
The first exit criteria in order to transition from the Board of Managers back to the elected board requires that there are no campuses in Houston ISD that have received an unacceptable academic accountability rating for 2 or more consecutive years.
So what is the probability of randomly selecting 240 Texas public schools without any of them having had failing grades in multiple years?
I absolutely believe the students in Houston ISD can achieve at a high level. I believe every single one of the students in every single school within this district can achieve at a high level, can attend a school that receives an acceptable academic rating. Yes, I believe that is absolutely possible.
Okay, so let me ask the question again. What is the probability of randomly selecting 240 Texas public schools without any of them having had failing grades in multiple years?
There are 1,200 school districts in Texas. I'm sure there are thousands of schools, Trustee. I could not answer that probability question standing here right now.
If you're so sure that there are ISDs that can meet that exit criteria, I think you should know the likelihood that it is to happen. So I'm going to go back and ask the question one more time. What is the probability of randomly selecting 240 Texas public schools without any of them having had failing grades in multiple years?
You're asking for a probability based on thousands of schools in the state of Texas that I do not know the answer to.
Will TEA commit to not chartering off our schools?
As I explained to you in your first opportunity to ask questions, Trustee, TEA will not be making programmatic decisions in this school district. The superintendent, in conjunction with the Board of Managers, will be making programmatic decisions.
So you can't commit to not chartering off our schools in the first 2 years that y'all will be taking over?
Trustee, the superintendent and the school board, this Board of Managers, will be making all programmatic decisions. Standing here today, and this is, Commissioner has said this, my colleague who presented the community meeting said this, it is not the agency's intention for any charters to be put in place upon the appointment of the new board and the superintendent. The superintendent and the school board will ultimately be charged with making decisions that are in the best interest of HISD students to improve academic outcomes for all students across the district.
Yes or no?
I answered your question, Trustee.
Will you promise to not charter off our schools? Yes or no?
TEA will not be making those decisions.
So you cannot sit here and say that you will not charter off our schools?
TEA won't be making those decisions.
Thank
Trustee.
you.
Trustee Baker?
Thank you so much. Let me just clear up a few things, which on record. Let me ask you, there have been allegations that this intervention is about political party and color of skin versus students. Could you clarify that, if whether or not this is politically motivated or whether it's about students?
This intervention is 100% about students and improving student outcomes. This isn't about politics. This isn't about skin color. This is about student outcomes, 100%.
And then also heard that that this was inevitable, that based on some of your reasons earlier, especially the 2019, before they filed lawsuits, that Commissioner Morat will be breaking the law if he did not intervene at this point, right?
So the commissioner is a constitutionally sworn officer. He is charged with upholding the laws of the state of Texas. The law of the state of Texas said that he shall intervene if a school within the district, within any district in the state, counted to 5. In 2019, there was another school district who had a school that counted to 5. This was Shepherd ISD. Similar to the steps that he took for Houston ISD, he also appointed a board of managers in Shepherd ISD. Over the last 3.5 years in Shepherd, while this process was on pause because of the injunction, Shepherd has seen significant academic gains and is actually about to start the process of transitioning back to an elected board. So yes, the commissioner had to act under the law.
And then also, next question, could you name some of the school districts in Texas where this has been successful, an intervention of such?
Yes, sir. So I mentioned earlier that there have been 7 boards of managers placed since 2008. And all of those 7 placements have been successful placements. Now, some of those were placements for financial reasons, some of them were for governance reasons, and some were for academic reasons. Those are the 3 larger reasons why boards of managers can be placed. All were successful. In 6 of the 7 districts, we saw significant academic increases. If I can remember off the top of my head, they were El Paso, El Paso, Southside, Edgewood, which are both in Bexar County and San Antonio. There was Shepherd and Marlin, both currently have boards of managers and have seen significant academic gains. And also North Forest, back in 2008, there was a board of managers put into place a few years before the annexation occurred, which happened 3 years after North Forest returned to elected control, after that board of managers was placed. So in 6 of the 7, we saw academic increases, in addition to successfully completing the exit criteria that were put in place at the time. In the 7th district, which was Beaumont was, a board of managers was placed for financial reasons. The board of managers corrected the financial reasons And the academics stayed steady while the Board of Managers was addressing those financial concerns. Again, a successful placement focused on the financials in Beaumont. So in all 7 placements over the last 15 years, the agency has seen success that would portend to the success here. It gives us every expectation that this process will also be successful in Houston ISD.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly, don't really like what's happening. I believe it's a sad day, and I've said this before, that this has come to this point. But I also don't believe in fighting against management that's already made up their mind. And so we've already looked into these options. So, and listen, I spent a lot of money on my race, a lot of knocking on doors. So I'm not rolling over either. However, and then I replaced a lady who was involved in a special accreditation investigation. And the whole West Side community supported me. And I told them that I would help try and rid the district of corruption by staying here and not leaving. But however, I'm now ready to be a partner and move forward. If this is it, we've got to be a partner. And so I want to state for the record that I'm ready to be a partner with the Board of Managers, with the Office of the Commissioner, and move forward. And let's just focus on the student outcomes. Let's get to the students. Let's get off of ourselves and get to the students. If this is what it takes to get to the students, then let's get the student outcomes increased and leave everything else up to God.
Thank you, Trustee.
That's all I have tonight.
Trustee Dygard?
I'm probably going to regret everything that I say for the next 2 minutes. So this law was passed in 2015. How many school districts triggered sanctions under it?
Since 2015, I know that there were 2 in 2019. I think that there was another 1 between 2015 and 2019. So I think
so
that's
1,000 school districts, most districts that had failing schools in 2015 took corrective actions to avoid this. Our school district in 2018, Dr. Grenada Lathan had a plan for all of the schools that were going to trigger sanctions, all of the ones that were coming up on the runway, all of the schools that popped in and out like a game of whack-a-mole. And our district at the time listened to the community who wanted no partners, no charters, and just sue TEA. We did that, and we lost. We own this. And I'm so unbelievably angry that this is where we're at, but this is where we're at.
Anyone else in the queue for round 2? Okay. I have a couple of questions. So the board is set to vote on the budget on June 8th. The Board of Managers is set to come in on June 1st. So tell us a little bit more about what you see that process looking like.
Until the Board of Managers is put in place and sworn in, and the new superintendent is appointed, you guys are the governing body of the district. And it is the hope of the agency that you guys continue through the budgeting process just like you would during a normal budgeting cycle. I understand that you were having continued meetings, budget workshops. I heard some references during the meeting tonight from Mr. House about an upcoming budget workshop. And so during this transition period, you guys are the governing board. And so the budgeting process moving forward, until that new appointment is made, is owned by this board.
The new board has to pass a budget by June 30th by state law. So are they expected to learn everything in 1 month?
So the hope is that you guys will take the laboring oar and do most of the work. As you guys know as trustees, there are processes every single month to make budget amendments. What is voted on in June is not what ends up happening, being put into place by the following month. So there will be opportunities for the Board of Managers to evaluate the budget that is passed, to conduct 3 weeks or 4 weeks of diligence on the budget, to understand the skeletal structure of the budget, and then to continually evaluate in conjunction with the superintendent to decide if amendments need to be made to the budget that is passed by June 30th.
Is my understanding that there's some HISD vendors that have applied to the Board of Managers? Is there, what is your process for evaluating vendors who are applying to the Board of Managers?
So earlier, Trustee, I mentioned that there are a few disqualifying factors, not many, but a few. One is if you don't live in the HISD boundaries, that is an absolute requirement. Number two is if you're a vendor of the school district. We asked on the application whether you are a vendor or I think, and this was language that I always forget, I think within 2 degrees of familial relations, or consanguinity is the legal term for that. And so that is also a disqualifying factor if them or their family member is a vendor to the school district. Now, that's not a statutory rule. That is just to avoid the appearance of impropriety, a disqualifying factor that the agency put into place. And then the third one, as I mentioned earlier, that is statutory, is an employee of the school district.
Thank you. Trustee Blucher-Daniels.
Thank you. A couple of questions. First, let me just say, I kind of apologize to you for having to stay in here and take this. But one thing, when you leave here, you'll have thicker skin. That's for sure. But and please, as you go forward, I have, as a graduate of the Phyllis Willie High School, I have an issue with utilizing the term economically disadvantaged. Children can't help it because they're economically disadvantaged. Let's find another word for that to describe that, be it financially challenged. But economically disadvantaged, they're hearing this continuously, and they think that they're part of, they're getting ingrained in them that they're less than, and we don't want to do that. So if we're all concerned with children, let's work on that first. Who's paying for the additional coaching, and that TEA will send additional, and will TEA send additional financing for that coaching, to the district? But who's paying for the coaching programs?
The Lone Star Governance coaching, is that what you're
correct? I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay, and then after the appointment, or leading up to the
Both.
appointment? Leading up to the appointment, all of the trainings are covered by TEA. After the appointment, there are agency grants related specifically to Lone Star Governance. They have what's called an exemplar cohort that allows for the intensive coaching that this board will be expected to undertake. That is a grant opportunity available to the school board to support them in this coaching that is going to be required.
Okay, you keep saying to the school board, to the Board of Managers.
To the Board of
We're
Managers.
the school board.
Yes, Trustee.
To the Board of Managers. Okay, and how many students are in Shepherd, and how many board of directors do they have?
I think Shepherd has about 1,000 students. And what was the second part of that question?
What does the board look like? The board.
There's seven.
Seven
board
on the school board. One district, North Forest, as I mentioned to you, is now going through its second takeover. The second one, after you say annexation, but it ended up being a takeover, so that they're having to go through that again. And again, the psyche of students is telling the kids that you're low income, you've been taken over, you're not good enough, we've annexed you, and you're still not producing. So that plays on the psyche. I don't know if you're familiar with the study that was done in the 60s with the black doll and the white doll. Okay, we're going to educate you on that one. Could the BOM decide, the Board of Managers decide to close Wheatley?
Theoretically, they could decide that, Trustee, but that is not our expectation at all. If that's what the commissioner could have made that decision, we do not believe as an agency that this is in the best interest of the students at Wheatley or the Wheatley community to close Wheatley.
Okay, the other thing is, how will the Board of Managers report any gifts, any association with anything that they received? Because we've had things in the past about money issues, discrepancies, and we don't want that to continue. So how will they report to the Secretary of State, or will they report to the Secretary of State the financial returns like we have to do because we're elected?
There are two answers to your question, Trustee. The Board of Managers will not be receiving or won't need to receive campaign contributions that would then need to be reported to the Secretary of State. The second answer to your question, though, is about gifts and kind of from an ethics lens.
Absolutely.
And I imagine, though I don't know, that there is a policy that you guys have about reporting gifts that exceed. In San Antonio, it was $25, I think, maybe even $10. If that policy is in place, certainly the Board of Managers will abide by that policy, just like they have to abide by all of the policies that are currently in place. If that policy is not in place, I suspect they might put one in place, because it is good governance to require the reporting of gifts.
Write that down so you can take that back to Morath.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see anyone else in the queue for round 2, so that concludes. Okay. Oh. Okay. Trustee Allen?
This is going to be a first for me, ever. But I have one more question, so I would like to have I motion to have a round 3. I move that we have a round 3.
Okay, do I have a second? We have a motion by Trustee Allen and a second by Trustee Baker. Please vote. And again, let's be patient, as this is a new system. Awesome.
You want to share?
I'm okay, Trustee. Thank you.
Voting is closing. Motion passes, 7 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 abstention. Trustee, I believe, Trustee Allen.
Okay, like I said, I have one more question. And one comment that we did not lose. I know Trustee Dago put a no on there because we did not lose. We gave up the fight. We had a 5-4 vote when the Morath told us that we had an administrative appeal, and 5 people decided that we were not going to take that last. I'm one of those that fight to the end. My question, this process that you outlined for us, it says one thing, but a superintendent has already approached one of our chiefs to convince that chief to stay. How can we trust the process? Or are you saying that either that prospective superintendent is lying or that chief is lying? Or is the new superintendent coming in corrupt?
Trustee, there has not been a superintendent selected, appointed, hired, anything like that. The commissioner is still in the process of evaluating superintendent, is going through the superintendent evaluation process, and he will announce a decision on or around June 1st, just like has been planned since.
So if we find out that superintendent that asked our chief turns out to be the superintendent that Mike Morath selected, then something is wrong. And not the board being corrupt, but the superintendent and Commissioner Morath?
Trustee, I don't have any information on any of these allegations that you're making.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else in the queue for round 3. Okay. So that concludes our discussion and report items. Thank you, Mr. Lecholop.